There. Welcome to this live session on grief here on Insight Timer. I'm Steve Walker, a life coach and meditation teacher here on Insight Timer. So thanks for joining. Um, as you know, these live sessions are free. They're supported with donations from people like you. So if you feel inspired at some point to give a donation, thanks in advance for that. I really appreciate it. Um, If you've been with me before, you know that I like to start off with a brief meditation just to ground ourselves in this present moment. Um, it's so easy to be time traveling to the past or the future and to not really be fully present with whatever we're doing or whomever we're speaking with or whatever we're experiencing. And so I think it's a good idea always to take a deep breath or two and ground ourselves in this moment. So if you feel comfortable, close your eyes or gaze softly off into the distance and just focus on your breathing and the sound of my voice. That's it. Thoughts are going to intrude. That's what they do. It's okay. No judgment. It's an opportunity to become the observer, to train yourself to be the observer, and to choose to refocus your attention, your energy, wherever you choose to. In this case, back to your breathing and the sound of my voice. And so let's take a few breaths, just our normal rhythm. Um, and then be present. That's it. That's our job. Be present right now. If you hear sounds around you, that's okay. Again, just be the observer. Refocus to your breathing and the sound of my voice. That's it. Now let's take one or two deep cleansing breaths. Kind of reset our nervous system a bit. So breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. And then at the top, take another little sip of breath in. Hold it for a second. And then out slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. And maybe do that 1, maybe 2 more times. And then when you feel comfortable and ready, you can come back, open your eyes. And if you feel comfortable, people are already in the chat. I love an active chat, so I hope you'll participate actively in the chat yourself. Makes it feel more like a conversation and creates that sense of community that a lot of us are just craving right now. And maybe let us know where you're tuning in from. I'm just outside of Boston. I can see the skyline from my window. It's a little hazy, cold, right? Got a little bit more snow last night. Yeah. Lisa, good morning to you. Good to see you here. Beth, hello. Good to see you. Um, so so let's get into it. Let's start talking about grief. Um, you know, grief is an interesting um, topic in part because it is both a universal experience in the sense that everybody experiences grief, right? So it's relevant to everybody. But everybody experiences it differently. And even the same person can experience a similar kind of grief, right? A similar loss in wildly different ways, right? I experienced grief differently when my mother died as opposed to when my father died, right? Um, and and this is true for most people, even though we do want to feel like it's predictable and controllable and all that, but for the most part, it's not. There's even the famous I think it's 5 stages of grief, right? And there's some wisdom and truth to those stages, but it's not so neat. We don't follow those 5 stages neatly. by any means, and they can feel different for each person every time you experience grief. So I think the first thing to understand is that it is both universal and very unique to each person and even each experience of grief. Um, when 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 I'm talking about grief, I want to be clear that I'm not just talking about the loss of a loved one or someone passing. There are lots of different types of grief, right? There's the grief of um, a transition, right? Something ends, right? A time in your life ends. It could be a relationship, a marriage. It could be a job. You could move from one place to another. There's a loss involved. Something ends, even if it's a good thing that's happening, a good change that's happening. There's a loss involved, and there's grieving that needs to happen. And if we don't grieve the way we need to, we're going to pay the price for it in terms of either not being fully present and ready for whatever comes next, or carrying forward some unresolved pain or resentment or guilt, shame, right? So the grieving is really important for us to be able to move forward with our lives and experience new people and new opportunities with an open heart, an open mind, and hopefully more healed. So there's lots of different types of grief, right? And and also, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that oftentimes when there's some kind of change that involves a loss and there's grieving to be done, that part of what needs to be grieved is a change in or a loss of identity. And that's something that comes up often when I'm coaching people, is that they might grieve the person or the relationship that ends, but they don't grieve the part of them that is gone or changed, right? The identity part. And and that's often what kind of hangs over our heads moving forward. So it's important to recognize that and understand that. And because a lot of people don't, and a lot of people don't do the healing or grieving for that, right? Um, uh, Another thing about kind of basics of grieving is that, contrary to what a lot of people believe or hope, is that grieving isn't linear. Um, it can feel more like a spiral. It can feel like waves coming in waves and different size waves and different intervals between the waves, right? Um, you can feel like you've gone through the grieving process, and then it can kind of revisit you weeks, months, years, decades later. So it's different. The patterns are different, and I think recognizing that there's no right or wrong. Um, uh, there's no, as a result, in a way, no right or wrong way to grieve, other than like don't repress or suppress your emotions. Don't judge them, right? I mean, whatever you're feeling, you're feeling. There's nothing to fix, right? Grieving is not about fixing something. Grieving is about experiencing the loss. It's about acknowledging it. It's about maybe doing some healing where you need to heal. But grief is certainly, when we're talking about the grief for someone who has either passed or a relationship that has ended. Grief is about love, right? Without love in those situations, there's usually no grief. Um, there is, it is an expression of love. Um, some people talk about it as it's love, kind of without, um, uh, an actual. person to, kind of not just physically, but, in reality, express that love to. And so it's this, in a way, a love that feels unmoored in a way, but it doesn't have to, right? That part of grieving is not moving on from the person or the relationship. It's moving on with that love, with that sense of loss, with that um, acknowledgement that that person, the memories, the experiences, the impact they had on you goes forward with you. It has changed you. It is a part of you, right? So it's moving on with, right, when we're grieving a person in some way, shape, or form, right? I hope that makes sense. Because I think that's, there's a lot of people who expect people when they're grieving to, like, move on, get on with your life, like kind of leave the person and the experience behind. No, that's a part of you. I mean, it's one of the beautiful things that helps us heal and be able to carry on and live and experience life, experience love again. Is that that person and that love is always with you, right? It's always with you. Um, and we shouldn't be trying to deny that or suppress that, right? I hope that makes sense. Um, and so, um, yeah, so I think that's important. I also think that it's important to recognize that there's a wide range of emotions that come with grief. We often associate grief with sadness. And sometimes it becomes difficult even for people to distinguish between kind of the sadness that comes with grief and depression. And if you're ever concerned that you might be straddling that line or heading more into the depression side, that's a good time to reach out to a therapist or psychiatrist, right? To get some professional help to help you figure out, are you actually experiencing some form of depression, even if it's just situational, and maybe get some help with that. Um, but there's a whole range of emotions that can manifest themselves in the grieving process, right? Anger, guilt, shame, regret, um, uh, kind of emotional tenderness, um, confusion. How about this one? Relief, right? And then sometimes that makes us feel guilty again, right? Because why do I feel relieved, right? But it's natural to feel all those emotions when you're grieving, right? Totally natural. And you may not experience all of them, but if you do, whichever ones, it's okay. Like, part of healthy grieving is acknowledging how you're feeling, allowing yourself to feel that, not like dwelling or spiraling on it, not like perseverating, but being present, practicing mindfulness. We're all here on Insight Timer. Part of the beauty of mindfulness is to be able to acknowledge the way you're feeling and really feel it, right? And then, just as we did when we were meditating a few minutes ago, and we chose to acknowledge and observe a thought and then refocus our attention, we can do the same thing when we're grieving. Okay, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling relief. I'm feeling whatever I am. I'm going to feel that right now. And then later on, I'm going to go to the grocery store, right? I'm going to go run errands. I'm going to go see family, right? And if, while I'm with family at some point, I feel sad and I cry a little bit, then that's great. I cry, right? But then it's okay if I laugh 5 minutes later. Again, like when you go to a funeral, it's filled with laughter and tears, right? And both of those are natural things to feel when you're grieving, right? So allow yourself to do that, right? Allow yourself to do that. Relief is a really interesting one because, it feels like, oh, am I happy that this person passed, or am I happy that this relationship ended? And rather than judging you for having that emotion of feeling relief, it's more about maybe being curious about it. Like, oh, what is that relief about? Right. To understand that. But also, depending on the circumstances, it may be perfectly natural. If it's the end of a relationship, maybe there was a lot of fighting and a lot of strife and conflict towards the end. Sure, there's going to be a sense of relief afterwards, right? You may be heartbroken, devastated, right, about the end of the relationship, but you can also have moments where you feel relief from that, right? Someone passes after a long or difficult illness, maybe. Maybe you were one of the caretakers. Uh, Feeling relief because that person is no longer suffering, feeling relief because your life now isn't consumed by being the caretaker all the time, which can be so exhausting physically and mentally and emotionally. It's a natural thing to feel. Don't feel guilty for it. It's a perfectly natural thing to experience, right? Perfectly natural. So I think it's about understanding and recognizing the variability of how you can experience grief, the both in terms of timing, sequencing, range of emotions, etc., and being able to observe that, to not judge, to not feel like there's something wrong with you, but just to acknowledge it, maybe to be curious about how you're experiencing it. When you need help or could use help with it, whether it's a therapist or, in some cases, a life coach can be really good helping in the grieving process. Um, Whatever it is, reaching out to a friend or family member, right? That's what you do, right? But not because there's something broken, but because during the healing process, and grieving, it's helpful sometimes to get help. It's helpful to get support, right? I'm talking a lot. Let me go to the chat, catch up here. Lisa in rural Washington State, great, great, great. Love it out there. Beth in Washington State, west of Seattle, beautiful area. Uh, Lisa east of Portland, Vancouver, a lot of Pacific Northwest, well represented today. Lisa says, my most intense grief is over lives that are forever altered. Yeah, right? Really interesting, right? Yeah. Beth says, yeah, there we go. Yeah, rural areas. Thanks, Beth. Janice says, it's hard to grieve when the person is still alive but has cut you off. That's an interesting one, right? Yeah, I've experienced that. My aunt is so stubborn she cannot apologize, so she pushed me away. I'm heartbroken. Yeah, that's a hard one, right? Because again, like it feels like the level of loss and grief of someone who passed away, but they're still alive, right? And so, what I try to do in those situations, and again, it's none of these things are like cure alls or fix alls. What I try to do with that is acknowledge that feeling, right? It's a natural way to feel. We need to develop resilience to be able to experience things that are heartbreaking and frustrating and sad and all that, right? And some of which persist. But I also try to create more and more opportunities for me to channel that into gratitude as well, because that wouldn't be so heartbreaking if that person didn't mean so much and there weren't so many good memories or good experiences or significance to that person in your life in the past. And so what I try to do is be really deeply rooted, grounded in gratitude for what I have, because people come in and out of our lives for lots of different reasons. Everything is temporary, right? The only person who's along for the whole ride is you. And so embracing and acknowledging that impermanence, that temporary nature of everything, including the people in our lives, and really trying to focus on gratitude because we had them in our lives in an active way for however long it was. They can make an enormous impact for even a brief amount of time. You've had that where somebody comes into your life briefly, they have a huge impact, then they're gone for whatever reason. That it's amazing, right? It's not about longevity. There's some people who are in your life for a long time and they have very little impact on your life. There are other people who are like that bolt of lightning, right? So remember that and say, for however long you've had this person in your life, gratitude, deep gratitude, doesn't mean you're not also going to feel heartbroken at times. You can feel two different emotions simultaneously. That's okay. It happens. It's natural, right? We need to find comfort in that. That, yeah, I can feel these two different things at the same time, right? We live in a day and age where we tend to avoid discomfort, right? We get to our phones, and when if you're like me, I used to do this in the checkout line at the supermarket all the time. Get on my phone, and I'm like, why can't I just be bored for a couple of minutes, or friendly to the people around me, or have a conversation with the checkout person? And so when I stopped taking out my phone, I got a lot happier. But we do tend to have all these ways to escape discomfort. Discomfort is a part of life. We need to be okay with it. And one of the ways that can happen sometimes is by holding two what feel like contradictory emotions at the same time. And grief does that a lot. It does it a lot, right? Beth says grief stacking. When I have several areas of my life grief, yeah, that's tough, right? That can happen. But again, it's important to make sure that rather than catastrophizing and kind of exacerbating the grief stacking feeling, to be able to create space, Beth, for grieving each of those people or situations is really important, right? Because otherwise, we're not really doing the grieving for each of those people or things. We're just kind of having this general experience. And I had that at one point where I had a relationship that really came to a final end basically at the same time that my dad died. And I called a friend. I said, I feel like I have to reach up to touch bottom. And there was a certain amount of me, I think, that subconsciously was relieved that both of them happened at the same time so that I didn't have to grieve them each separately. But the reality is, I didn't grieve appropriately for either of them as a result. And so I spent years with that grief for each of those losses coming back to me. And it really caused me a lot of problems. So be aware of that you need to create the time and space to grieve for each and not treat it like it's one big catastrophe. Hard, but important. I hope that helps and makes sense. Jenna says, yeah, exactly. I don't want to grieve her now. And when she passes, she's 89. Yeah, but it's okay. Like, again, the grief isn't like, oh, it's done, right? You can grieve her leaving your life actively and then grieve her passing later on. Both of those are healthy, and you shouldn't prevent yourself from doing that. And they can feel different, or they may feel very similar. Either way, it's okay. But try not to manage it in that way, that embrace that, sure, there's some grieving to be done now, and there'll be grieving to do in the future. Yep, that's okay. That's okay. Claire says, I'm heartbroken over my adult daughter's life being so challenged with multiple mental health conditions and addiction. That's a hard one. Yep. A lot of experience with that, with certainly with clients and in my own life to some extent. I've had something similar. So incredibly sad for her. Yeah. And I think, I think, there's compassion and empathy. And this is a hard one, with a daughter, a child. There's the cliche that any parent is as happy as their least happy child, right? But I think, and again, no easy solution, but I think a practice that you can engage in is like I was talking about earlier, trying to find places for gratitude, right? Either about things now, whether it's if there's help or support available, that that helps in some ways, that's great. Moments maybe of joy or connection, that's great. Or in the past, when things maybe had a pause or felt a little better, right? Find whatever you can for gratitude there. Um, Second is trying to be clear about your own boundaries in a way. Feel the sadness and compassion, right? Feel empathy, but try, and this is, as a parent, I know how unbelievably difficult this is. Try to create some moments where you're not taking it on as your own emotion, but rather it's empathy, it's compassion, right? Maybe with those little sprinklings of gratitude someplace in there. But trying not to be constantly taking on the emotional load as your own. That's, as a parent, I can tell you, easier said than done. But it's, in some ways, we need to buy ourselves these moments of peace, these moments of grace, right? Because otherwise, what are we doing? We're just constantly draining and feeling like we lack control. And I think the final thing is, and I'm sure you're doing this, but what are concrete things you can do to help, and then understand you can do those. And then there's a certain amount of radical acceptance that, like, it is what it is. And what are you going to do with this as the baseline, right? If this is the new baseline, wherever this is right now, that has to be, almost to think about it as okay. I mean, it's like that is what it is. What do I do from here? Right? Because a lot of times those situations become really exacerbated, much more painful, because they don't meet the expectations that we had for our kids or those relationships. And we need to kind of shed the expectations and say, okay, this is who she is. I need to love her for who she is right now, and deal with her in the situation as she is, as it is right now, right? This is baseline. And that may be the most helpful thing I can offer, right? Because I think that at least the expectations, holding on to those, is what causes a lot of our suffering. A lot of our suffering. I hope that helps a little bit. It's that one's a tough one. Janice says, "Oh, Claire, big hugs." Yeah. Janice says, "But I still want to have a relationship with her before she's gone." We're talking about the aunt again. She is my mom's only sister and my last living elder. Yeah, I totally get that, right? And all you can do is reach out and be open, right? And see what happens. But we can't control other people. But you can certainly send out the energy, the loving energy, and the invitations to connect, right? Right. Janice says she's 71. Uh, Claire, so sorry. That is yeah, so sick and suicidal. I'm terrified for. So sorry. That is just horrific. Be kind to yourself. I think a lot of self care and compassion is really important there. But there's just no two ways about that, right? That is such a difficult situation. Um, Scholar says, "I like cycle from one grief to the next." Yeah, that's what some people do, right? But again, I think, like, they're, you know, if you can try to um, create space for yourself to have some self care, like real self care, right, and get help and support that you need. Um, I think that's really important, and to feel like you're not just kind of stuck in that cycle, but that you do give yourself permission for and create opportunities for joy and peace and love, and right. I think that is the path, or a path out of the cycle, maybe. Lisa said, "I don't know how to move on. My daughter's brain injury and the lifelong care that I'm committed to has turned my life upside down. It's all consuming." Yeah, right. A lot of people in your situation, that's exactly how they feel, right? And again, it's it's not moving on from, but moving on with. And so finding a way to move on in a way that feels, you know, like you're honoring the fact that these circumstances are so difficult, right? Um, but to find even small ways to create moments of peace for yourself, to get respite care, right? Um, I hope you're reaching out for support. Um, there are in many places, whether it's going the therapist route or social services, that sometimes can be really helpful. I know I have friends of mine who've been in that situation, have relied on whether it's from the government or um, uh, local nonprofits, that can be very helpful. But that is such a challenging one, Lisa. Um, Lisa says, I'm so grateful for her. She's a wonderful person. That's great. On a personal level, though, I haven't done anything but caretaking since September 2010. Wow, that's a long time. Um, yeah, I guess I would hope that that you're exploring or have explored ways to get some respite care. Um, that can be helpful. And if you need some help brainstorming that, let me know. I'd be happy to help. Um, but sending you a big hug and lots of love with that. That's such a hard situation. It's our baseline, right? That's the baseline you start with, right? Jenna says, "Thank you, Steve. Appreciate the insight. Hope it's helpful in some way." Right? Um, Jenna says, "I've done that more than once. Met with crickets. Yeah, and that's okay. You can't control that, right?" Um, Jenna says, "I'm going to immerse myself in the venerable monks in DC." Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, thanks for following too. I appreciate that, Jenna. And Lisa, same to you. Like, these are difficult situations, and again, part of grieving, and some of these situations are complex, right? Because it's not just involving grief and a clear loss, but there are ongoing challenges, right? That can be involved, right? And changes in your identity in some of these cases, and um, and so there's grieving that needs to happen, but also in some cases there's grieving alongside of crisis management, right? I mean, we even see that when people pass. If you're in the immediate family, you're somehow expected to grieve while organizing whatever services there need to be, or you want to be, or celebrations, or burial or cremation or whatever you're doing, um, and legal and financial uh, situations that need to be addressed and resolved, family dynamics, big decisions about what to do with houses, with money, right? With taking care of remaining relatives who might need significant care. Somehow we're supposed to deal with all of that at the same time. It's almost inhumane in a way, what we expect of ourselves and other people, um, uh, while we're grieving, right? Which is challenging in and of itself. And so I think to acknowledge that and to be really good about advocating for ourselves and asking for help, and creating time and space for ourselves to do the grieving along with whatever else we might have to manage. Um, and understanding that, not everybody's going to respect our boundaries that we have to put in place during these times, but it's important for us to respect our own boundaries, and get some clarity about what they need to be. I know I certainly dealt with that, particularly when my dad died, and oh my God, there were so many people misbehaving in the family, and who had their own fears and anxieties and their own agendas, and I had to keep enforcing my own boundaries to protect myself, and even then it was imperfect, and ultimately ultimately the boundaries got blown out of the water, but I did get myself some some relief at times. So I think getting clarity about what you need and being able to advocate for that, and at times to hold hold uh, hold your boundaries in place is really important, because it's really challenging. And again, sometimes we don't thoroughly grieve because there is so much going on during that time. Think about it. If you change jobs and move at the same time, and wow, there's relationships that may be ending or changing, and there's leaving a place, and there's your identity shifting, and now there's also the logistics of moving and the stress of that and starting a new job. There's all this stuff that's happening. So a lot of times we didn't grieve for the people that we left behind in our past job, for the people we left behind in the old place that we were living. Maybe we moved farther away from family, right? I mean, it's like we need to make sure that we're going for walks, spending time in nature, meditating, journaling, right? Creating opportunities to feel what we need to feel and process them, and right? Talk to a life coach, talk to a therapist, right? Whatever feels like a better fit. Like, those are the things we need to do. We need to create space for that. And a lot of times in these transitions, we sacrifice the healing and the grieving that needs to happen. And again, some of it's that other people in society are putting these expectations on us, right? People are like, you got to get over it, you got to move on, you got to, you know, if you lost a partner, start dating again, and like, people have their own pace and their own way of grieving and their own way of knowing when it's okay for them to re-enter different parts of life again. Um, and and that's okay, right? So we need to relieve ourselves, give ourselves permission to not follow the expectations of other people in society, especially, like, living in the United States. For me, in the West in general, I think we don't deal with death very well. And so death and anything that feels like it, right, that kind of level of grieving, we oftentimes repress it or suppress it. I remember, I was talking about this yesterday, that I'd heard for a long time about the Tibetan book of living and dying, and how powerful it was. And I finally, several years back, I was in Seattle and in a fantastic bookstore, and uh, and I came across the book. I said, "Oh my gosh, this is the book. I should probably get it. I'm not really interested in the dying part, but the living part, I'm really interested in how to live better." And so I started reading the book and realized, oh, it's all about dying, because the premise of the book in part is one of the reasons why we have so much suffering in the West, and that uh, we don't live with the mindfulness and gratitude that would unlock a lot more happiness and peace in our lives, is that we don't deal with dying well. We are afraid of it. We try to ignore it. We put it off, prolong it. We hide people, who are getting closer to dying, instead of them living with extended family, which is what used to happen. Often they're in a nursing home or assisted living, or at the end in hospice, and those may be really appropriate choices, but it removes them from day to day living for everybody else, right? Um, and so we don't have that experience as much, um, and we don't talk about it, right? Um, uh, as much, but the fact that we're all going to die, and that life is finite, and that we don't know when the end is coming, is what makes life so precious and so beautiful, and what can empower us and focus us on gratitude and mindfulness and being fully present, and really appreciating and taking full advantage of the opportunities and the people and the experiences in our lives, and to not waste it. and to really be present, right? With the good and the bad, right? So that we can grieve and feel the losses and be able to do that in a healthy way and be able to experience the highs, the love, the connection, right? The meaning, the making a difference in the lives of other people, all of that. And so I think it's really important to have a healthy approach towards grieving in general throughout our lives, no matter what the circumstances are, so that we can be more present and we can experience life more fully, that we're not afraid of grieving, that it is a form of love, right? It is a representation of love. Um, it is a part of life, right? Things are constantly changing. Again, people are coming and going in our lives. And if we're afraid of heartbreak and we're afraid of loss and we're afraid of grieving, then that will close us off to being vulnerable to new connections and new experiences of love. And why would we do that? That's why we're here. We're here to be love. We're here to experience love. We're here to be loving energy, to have connections with people, authentic, beautiful, meaningful connections, to make a difference in each other's lives. And how can we do that if we're holding each other at arm's distance because we're afraid of heartbreak and we're afraid of loss and we're afraid of grieving? So we need to embrace it, accept it as a reality, radical acceptance of that reality, right? Again, so much of our suffering, I talked about this last week, so much of our suffering is resisting reality, right? So much of our suffering is resisting reality. We need to understand it and embrace it, and then be mindful and present of what we can do in this moment right now. And again, when we're grieving, that's part of the challenge, right? Is to experience the grief, but through that grieving, to be fully mindful and present in this moment, which will also help us manage the grief in the sense of being able to tolerate it, right? And being able to move forward with it, right? And and that mindfulness is so important. We can't have the mindfulness without experiencing the grieving. And we probably can't grieve in a healthy way, in a healing way, without the mindfulness, right? So be present, right? And that will also make sure that we're present when we have moments of joy and love and connection, right? They come together, right? It's all part of the package. Um, I want to take a pause here. Close your eyes again if you feel comfortable, and take a deep breath or two. And then, what's coming up for you? What are you taking away from this? What are you thinking about? What are you wondering about? Are there things you're still confused about, or things you just like to share and put out to the universe? Because that's part of what this space is for. Also, it's just to put whatever you're dealing with out there and get some love back, right? Um, and again, what's your takeaway? What's one small thing maybe that you can do the rest of today to either acknowledge something that you're feeling, or do some self care, connect with somebody, ask for help, right? Get some support, whatever it is. What's a takeaway, and what's something that you could do, one small step you could do today? And if you feel comfortable, you can put that in the chat, share it, and you might inspire somebody else or validate the way someone else is feeling, right? Um, yeah, and what we can most do, I think also the other thing I wanted to mention was, how do we help other people who are grieving? And kind of the nature of this piece today, I did a lot more. I have to do all the talking, right? Because you all are in the chat, so I can read it off and react to it. But a lot of what we can do, and certainly in training I got for grief coaching is to be present, to have that person feel seen and validated and loved, right? That's what most people need, right? Um, we need to feel seen and heard and validated and loved, right? So if you can do that for somebody else when they're grieving, that's such a gift, right? A lot of times, with the best of intentions, we tell people who are grieving, let me know if there's anything I can do. Well, now it's a nice sentiment, but if you think about it, you've now told them, hey, your job is to let me know what I can do to help you. Most of the time, people are incapable of knowing that. Once in a while, people say, like, oh, could you pick up dinner or whatever? Be present for them. That's number one. Don't give them another job. And just do nice things for them if you want, right? Have dinner delivered. Send them a gift certificate for one of the local restaurants that delivers. Um, you know, tell them, I can pick up your kids after school this week if you want. Like, don't have them be the ones to be your chief of staff and manage what you're going to do for them. Do something, ask them if it's okay if you did it, or just be available, be present, right? Um, Jenna says, I keep wondering why I keep trying so hard to fix this. I didn't even start it. Yeah, get to let go of fixing. You can't fix it. You can control your end of it. You can be loving and compassionate and open. You can't control other people. Just can't. Right? Got to find a way to make peace with that. Beth says, staying in the moment and focusing on breathing are good reminders for me. That's great. That's great. Lisa says, today I will just accept where we are and do something nice for the evening. That's beautiful, Lisa. That's all you can do, one day at a time. That mindset, right? If anybody else wants to put either a question or a takeaway or some small thing you're committing to, put it in the chat. As I said at the beginning, these live sessions are supported with donations from people like you. So if you feel inspired to make a donation, feel free, and it's deeply appreciated. You know, so thanks in advance for that. I do hope you're following me. If you're not, please do. And if you want to connect, there's more information there on how to connect, and there's a group that I have here on Insight Timer that I hope you'll join, of people trying to live with integrity and joy and create a sense of community. If we can, we'll try to do that. And so I hope you'll join that group as well. That's certainly what I'm after, is trying to create a greater sense of community here. I have a little mini course that you can take here on Insight Timer as well on living with integrity. And a lot of people have taken it and seem to really like it. And you can, post comments and questions, whatever. We have a little back and forth. And so I'd love that if you would take it and engage in a conversation and, let me know how I can be of more help to you. And I have a lot of meditations on here. I hope you'll try them and rate and review them and let me know if there are meditations or topics that you'd like me to cover in future meditations or live sessions. I'd like this to be as responsive to you as possible. And what else? And then I don't have a card to put up for it, but my next session, I'm actually going away tomorrow. First time in a long time taking a real vacation where I'm not going to do any lives or meet with clients for a week or so. So I'm going to see family in Florida and get away from the cold and the snow. And so I'll be back 2 weeks from today at noon Eastern, right? And that will be on conflict and difficult conversations, another kind of universal experience that varies from moment to moment and person to person, but we'll talk about how and why we can manage conflict better, how we need to have difficult conversations, though a lot of us avoid them like the plague, and how we can try to have those conversations with empathy and compassion and curiosity and grace, and do so in a way that builds trust and builds the emotional bank account of our relationships rather than depleting them, right? So I hope you'll join for that. Scarlett, thank you for the donation. Really appreciate that. That means a lot. And Emily, you're welcome. Thank you, and thanks for the good wishes. And I will certainly try to bring a lot of integrity and joy to my vacation, as I do to every day. But I thank you all for being here. I'm so deeply appreciative of this community and the ability to connect with all of you here. Again, I hope you'll join the group that I have, and again, go to my profile and reach out if I can be of help. And sending you all much love and gratitude. And I look forward to seeing you back here in a couple of weeks. Again, much love and much gratitude to all of you, and to all of you who are experiencing any kind of grief right now. Especially a lot of love to you, and hope a lot of grace and patience for yourself. In the end, we do need to find a way to treat ourselves with grace and compassion and love, all the time, but particularly when we're going through something difficult and challenging, as some of you are. So, number one, I hope you feel seen, and certainly a lot of love here today, right? Be well.